I didn't even get the chance to sit down before it was over. We were supposed to meet for lunch, just a quiet catch-up before the wedding chaos began. The cafe was busy, the kind of place we used to like. Calm music, small tables, warm smells. I saw him already seated, not even touching the coffee in front of him. As I walked toward him, I noticed something different in his face. And then he said it just like that. "We need to talk." That sentence alone knocked the air out of me. I tried to stay calm, even smiled a little as I sat down. I asked if something was wrong, thinking maybe the florist had canceled or something silly. He didn't even look up. Instead, he pulled a little box out of his coat and placed it on the table, not to give it to me but to take something back. That was the moment I realized what was happening. "I can't go through with this," he said. "You and we're not heading in the same direction anymore." I asked if this was about someone else. And it was. Her name was Lauren Delaney. I'd heard it before, briefly mentioned once or twice, always tied to some business connection. She came from money, old and loud money. Her father was one of those men who didn't invest unless he controlled the boardroom too. My fiancé, ex-fiancé now, told me he and Lauren had more in common, shared goals, whatever that meant. "You're sweet, Emma," he said, like he was offering me pity instead of truth. "You deserve someone simpler." He asked for the ring back. Said it had belonged to his grandmother. I didn't argue. My fingers were shaking, but I pulled it off and placed it in the same spot where he'd set the box. Then I stood up. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I just walked out. Outside, I kept walking, turning corners without looking, trying to hold myself together. I didn't cry until I reached the bus stop 2 blocks away. When I realized I had no idea where to go, I couldn't return to the apartment. Not after that. But I had to. I had nowhere else. When I got there, I didn't even need to unlock the door. My things were already by it, suitcases lined up like I'd missed a flight. Labeled, organized, zipped. Not his doing. Too neat for that. Probably his mother's touch. I sat down beside them, numb. I'd given up my lease a few weeks earlier, passed it on to a nursing student who needed it more. Every penny I had saved had gone into the wedding. There wasn't much left. Maybe $90 in my account. Payday was still 6 days away. So I did the one thing I hadn't done in a long time. I called Diane. She answered with the same voice I remembered, warm, steady, never rushed. "Emma, baby, where have you been?" "I was just thinking about those boots we saw online." I couldn't say anything. All I did was cry. That was enough. She told me to come over. Said I could stay. No questions. No judgment. Just love like always. An hour later, I was curled up on her couch, wrapped in a blanket that smelled like home and peppermint. She made me tea, sat beside me, stroked my hair like she used to when I was a teenager and thought every bad day would last forever. She didn't ask for details. She just said, "You've got space here, Emma. You don't have to prove anything." That night I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling in her spare room, my brain playing the same scenes over and over. His face, his voice, how quickly he walked away from everything we had built. I wasn't just sad. I felt small, foolish. Like I'd trusted too easily and now had nothing to show for it except packed bags and an aching chest. But the next morning I got up anyway. I showered, put on my scrubs, and went to work like nothing had happened. The nurses on my floor were kind. A few asked about the wedding. I nodded, smiled, gave excuses. Postponed. I told one of them. He had to travel for business. I hated lying, but the truth felt too raw. Too heavy to hand to someone in the middle of a shift change. 3 days passed like that. I went through the motions, pretending I wasn't falling apart inside. Pretending I wasn't back at the same starting line I thought I'd left behind years ago. But something strange happened on that 3rd day. I was reviewing charts when our head nurse, Jen, poked her head into the room and asked, "You still dreaming of disappearing from here?" I looked up confused. "What?" "There's a live-in job opening. Ian. Some private estate outside the city. Rich guy, used to be someone big in tech. Paralyzed now. Nobody lasts long with him, but the pay is insane." I laughed, a real one, which surprised me. "I'm not a home nurse." "You're a real nurse," Jen shot back. "And trust me, with your patience, you might actually last longer than a week." She gave me the name of the estate manager. I stared at the number on the card until midnight, standing outside Diane's back door with the cold pressing into my hands. I finally called. The woman's voice on the other end was clipped and direct. Be here by 9. Don't be late. 2 days later, I was on a plane to California with nothing but a duffel bag and a handful of doubts. The estate sat high above the ocean, tucked into the hills like it didn't want to be found. The house itself looked like something out of a design magazine. Glass walls, sharp corners, too perfect. The woman who greeted me at the door introduced herself as Teresa. She looked like someone who'd once run a hotel and never forgot it. She asked 5 questions, reviewed my resume without blinking, and said, "You're hired." Just like that. The rules were strict. No visitors, minimal time off, always on call. The pay? Triple what I made back home. I didn't hesitate. I signed the contract that night and was shown to a quiet room on the 2nd floor, across the hall from the patient's suite. The next morning, Teresa stood beside me in the hallway, holding her clipboard like a shield. "You sure you're ready?" she asked. "I already signed," I said. "That's not what I asked." I nodded anyway. She knocked on the door and opened it without waiting. The room inside was clean and cold, sunlight pouring in through glass walls, everything too big and too quiet. He sat by the window, facing away from us, in a sleek black wheelchair. "Mr. Walker," she said. "This is your new nurse, Emma Reynolds." He didn't turn. Not right away. Just tapped his fingers on the armrest like he was bored. Then slowly he turned around. He wasn't what I expected. Younger. Sharper. His face was tired, yes, but not from age. There was something in his eyes, something guarded. Something that said, "I've already decided you'll fail." "So," he said, voice low and dry. "Another one." I wanted to speak, to introduce myself properly, but he cut me off. "How long do you think you'll last?" he asked, looking past me like I was already a memory. I looked right back. "I'm not here to win anything," I said. "I'm here to do my job." He gave a little smile, the kind that didn't reach his eyes. "We'll see." Then he turned away again. And just like that, it began. The first few days were stiff, like 2 strangers stuck in a car for a long drive neither of them wanted to take. I did my rounds, stuck to the schedule, and stayed quiet. He didn't make it easy. Every time I handed him a medication or adjusted a therapy strap, he'd say something sarcastic or poke at my nerves to see if I'd snap. I didn't. I'd been through worse. I knew the difference between pain and fear, between someone lashing out and someone truly cruel. He wasn't cruel. Just closed off. I learned quickly not to expect any thank yous or pleasantries. He barely spoke unless necessary. When he did, it was clipped and tired, like each word cost something. But I noticed things. Like how he paid attention when I entered the room, or how he never complained when I had to move his legs during therapy. He didn't want pity. That much was clear. And I had no plans of offering it. One night, the wind outside wouldn't let up. The kind of night that made the whole house creak. I couldn't sleep, so I got up and wandered through the dark hall to close a few blinds. That's when I noticed the light still on in the gym. It was strange. He didn't spend time there unless I was with him. Out of habit, I told myself to ignore it. But something made me pause. I opened the door a crack. He was standing. Barely, but he was on his feet, gripping the parallel bars like his life depended on it. Sweat rolled down his face. His arms trembled. His legs, thin but still strong, pushed against the floor in tiny, uneven steps. I stood there frozen. Not because I was shocked, but because I realized he had been hiding this. He didn't see me at first. But then the door creaked louder than I meant it to. He turned fast, breathing hard, and the look on his face changed immediately. "What are you doing?" he snapped. "I saw the light," I said, still standing by the door. "I thought maybe you needed. Leave. Now." But I didn't. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. "Why are you hiding this?" I asked, not with anger, just quiet curiosity. He stared at me, gripping the bars tighter. "Because the second people see progress, they want a miracle. And when it doesn't come fast enough, they leave. They always leave. So your plan is to pretend there's nothing left?" I asked. "You don't understand," he said, voice sharp. "Maybe not. But maybe I understand more than you think." I took another step forward slowly. I've had people walk away too. Not because I failed, but because they didn't want to stay. His jaw clenched. I could see it, how much he didn't want to talk. How much of him wanted me to go? But he didn't tell me again. And after a moment, he sat back in his wheelchair, worn out, his arms shaking slightly. If you want to help me, he said, quieter now, you do it on my terms. No one else can know. Not Teresa. Not the staff. No one. Okay. I say stop, we stop. I say go, you help. No cheerleading. No speeches. Deal. He looked at me for a long moment. Then something small changed. I couldn't describe it. Just less tension in his shoulders. Less suspicion. You're not like the others, he muttered. I'm not trying to be, I replied. From that night on we trained in secret. Early mornings before the sun came through the kitchen windows. Quiet steps, small victories. He was focused, determined. And I stayed beside him, not to praise or push but to steady, to support. Some mornings he didn't speak at all. Others he would ask questions. About my life, my nursing background, what I did before all this. But never too personal. That line stayed firm. One morning I was organizing meds in my room when I heard a voice I didn't recognize. Male, confident, almost smug. I followed the sound and found him. Sitting in the estate's west sitting room like he owned the place. Expensive watch, drink in hand. Legs crossed like a man who hadn't been told no in a long time. Ryan sat across from him, silent but alert. The man laughed loudly. You look terrible, he joked. Ryan didn't smile. Good to see you too, Max. So this was Max, Ryan's business partner. The man who had supposedly stepped up to help manage Ryan's company after the accident. Something about him rubbed me the wrong way. Maybe it was the way he looked at Ryan, like he still expected him to stay broken. Or maybe it was the way he looked at me, slow and assessing, when I brought in the tea tray. This the new one? He asked Ryan without taking his eyes off me. She's my nurse, Ryan replied, calm but clear. The two of them started talking about business, contracts, shareholders, expansion strategies. I tried to block it out until I heard a name that made my stomach twist. Delaney. Max leaned in closer, lowering his voice. Her father says the money's ready. We just need your signature. Then we shift control to the holding firm. Delaney Capital will take it from there. Ryan said nothing. He just stared at the wall, hands tight on the armrests. Max kept pushing. I've already prepped the paperwork. All that's left is your signature. I slipped away before they noticed I was still standing there. My thoughts were racing. Delaney Capital. Lauren Delaney. The same woman Jason left me for. The same woman tied to Ryan's company now, trying to take control while he recovered. Was this all connected? Had they targeted him, both of us, for something bigger? That evening, as I helped Ryan stretch his legs, I broke the silence. I overheard something earlier, I said. About your company. He didn't react. Go on. So I told him everything. The conversation. The tone. The names. Including Lauren's. His expression didn't change much. Except when I mentioned Jason's name. You know him? I asked. He's come up before. Max talks about him. I think they're working together. I don't think your accident, or my broken engagement, are as separate as they seem. He looked at me thoughtful. Then turned away. I'll review the paperwork. That was all. I went back to my room that night and couldn't sleep. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I had connected dots that didn't exist. But what if I wasn't? The next morning there was a knock on my door. Ryan never knocked. I opened it to find him in his chair, a folder in his lap. You were right, he said. They're trying to take everything. He handed me the folder without another word. Inside were contracts, financial statements, and legal authorizations I didn't fully understand, but one thing was clear. They were shifting control of his company to a firm connected to Delaney Capital. The paperwork had Max's fingerprints all over it. I should have seen it, he said, voice low. He started setting this up months ago, while I was still in the hospital. I sat down across from him on the hallway bench, unsure what to say. So what now? Ryan stared straight ahead. Now we stop them. But I can't do it alone. You're sure you want me involved? I asked. You're the only one who noticed. The only one who listened. For a moment we were just quiet. The estate, usually so still and cold, felt like it was holding its breath. We started planning that night. Not just casually but with intent. After the house staff had gone to their quarters and Teresa had retired to her end of the wing, Ryan and I sat at the long table in the study. Piles of folders, sticky notes, legal pads. It was strange watching him like that. Focused. Precise. Like the old version of himself was coming back piece by piece. Some nights his hands would shake with exhaustion, but he wouldn't stop. Other times I'd catch him staring at nothing for a while before he'd blink and say, "Sorry. Just thinking how I let it get this far." I told him he didn't. That people like Max know how to move quietly, how to act helpful until they've made themselves essential. He didn't respond to that, but the next night, he looked more sure of himself. He got his lawyer involved without letting Max know. They started collecting email trails, timestamps, financial transfers. The more we dug, the more obvious it became. This wasn't just business maneuvering. It was a full-scale hijack. Ryan had been cut out of his own company one legal loophole at a time. The day before the board meeting, Ryan asked me to help him practice walking again. "Not just here," he said. "At the office. You really want to do that in front of all of them?" He nodded. "I want them to see I'm not gone." We practiced walking from the entryway to the study and back, then across the hall. He insisted on wearing a suit the next morning. Midnight blue, perfectly tailored. I hadn't seen him like that before. Not just sharp in appearance but grounded. Solid. His movements weren't flawless. He limped. He had to pause every few steps. But the way he held himself? There was no weakness in that. At the office building, people stared. They hadn't seen him in months. Word had spread that he was out of commission. Finished. But now here he was walking beside me, cane in hand, expression firm. Inside the boardroom, Max was already sitting at the head of the table, surrounded by charts and assistants. Lauren was beside him, calm and cold, her fingers wrapped around a pen like it was a weapon. And beside her, Jason. I hadn't expected to see him there. He looked up and saw me and didn't say a word. His face didn't even change. That hurt more than I thought it would. When Ryan entered, everyone stopped talking. Max stood up slowly. "You're walking." "Not perfectly," Ryan said. "But enough." He didn't take a seat. He walked straight to the front of the table, pulled out the folder he had prepared, and placed it down like a chess move. "This meeting," he said clearly, "is now under my authority." He opened the folder and began laying out every piece of proof, transfers, emails, contracts. The room stayed silent except for the turning of pages. When he finished, he stepped back and looked Max in the eye. "You gave yourself control of my company," Ryan said, "by hiding behind false signatures and empty promises." Max tried to respond, but it came out weak. "You can't prove I meant to." "I don't have to prove intent," Ryan cut in. "Only breach of duty. Which I just did." The board's lawyer, who had remained silent until then, stood. "Would you like to call for a vote of removal?" "Yes," Ryan said. "Effective immediately." Lauren stood up fast. "You don't know who you're messing with." "Oh, I do," Ryan said. "A woman using her father's name to push herself into spaces she didn't build. And a man," he turned to Max, "who forgot who helped him rise in the first place." She looked at me then. "And what is she?" "Your co-founder now." Ryan didn't hesitate. "She's the reason I'm even standing in this room." Jason looked away. The vote passed. Max was out. The contracts were voided. The company was back in Ryan's hands. After the room cleared, Ryan and I were the only ones left. He leaned on his cane, breathing heavy, but his eyes looked alive. "You did it," I said quietly. "No," he said. "We did." And he smiled. Not the usual guarded, polite smile. A real one. I didn't say anything else. I didn't need to. Something had shifted, not just around us but inside both of us. Weeks passed, and the house began to feel different too. Less like a museum. More like a place someone lived in. The windows were open more often. Light came in. Ryan still had tough days, but he didn't hide them. He let himself rest, but he also laughed more. So did I. We started cooking once a week. Well, he tried. He wasn't great at it, but I let him burn rice and swear at the oven because it meant something that he wanted to try. I'd sit at the island, legs curled up on the stool, watching him fumble with a spatula. One night he handed me something barely edible and said, "If this kills you, I want it on record, I tried." You'll just inherit my books, I joked. Actually, he said, turning serious, I already moved the company into a trust. One that includes you. I blinked. Wait, what? I'm not giving it to you, he clarified. But I want you to be part of whatever comes next. Because I built better things with you than I ever did before. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black box. Before I could say anything, he opened it. A simple gold band with a single sapphire. You don't have to answer now. Or even this year, he said. But I'd like to ask, will you consider staying? Not to fix me. Not to save me. Just to walk this with me. I didn't cry. I thought I would. But instead I just breathed. For the first time in a long time it felt easy. I took the ring and slipped it onto my finger. I'm not saying yes, I said, smiling. But I'm not saying no. He laughed. That sounds exactly like you. We didn't rush into anything after that. There were no big announcements or Facebook updates. Just mornings, coffee, walks down the hallway, and the beach. On his birthday we drove up the coast. Just the two of us. He walked beside me, no cane, no chair, along the shoreline while the wind pushed our hair in every direction. At one point he looked out at the waves and asked, "Do you think we'll ever go back to who we were?" I shook my head. "I hope not," I said. "Because who we are now is better." He didn't say anything. He just reached for my hand and held on. The months that followed felt quiet, not in a dull way, but in the kind of calm that comes after a storm. The house, which once echoed with silence and cold spaces, started to breathe. It wasn't loud or busy, but it felt lived in. Lighter. Even the garden outside, which had looked forgotten and dried up, started to show color again. The staff smiled more. The windows stayed open longer. And Ryan, he didn't disappear into that dark place anymore. He still had hard days. There were mornings where his legs didn't want to move the way he needed them to. He'd get frustrated, go quiet, stare out the window for an hour. But the difference now was, he didn't push me away when those moments came. He didn't pretend he didn't care. He let me see the struggle. And slowly I started letting him see mine too. There were days when I wake up feeling like everything I had lost would come crashing back. The dress I never wore. The guests who never came. The life I thought I had built gone in a moment. But Ryan never pushed for me to talk about it. He just showed up. He made coffee. He asked about my books. He teased me about my terrible singing in the mornings. It was enough. One Saturday afternoon, we sat on the back patio. The sky was clear, the kind of blue that made you forget about anything heavy. Ryan had a sketchpad on his lap. He'd taken up drawing again. Said it helped him think. I passed my certification, I told him. I can start a private practice now if I want to. He looked up, surprised but proud. That's huge. I haven't decided what to do with it yet, I admitted. I just wanted to finish something that belonged to me, not something tied to anyone else. He nodded. Whatever you decide, it's yours. That sentence stayed with me. We hired 2 more nurses for the estate. I helped train them, helped set up a better care plan for the future. I didn't need to be there 24/7 anymore, but I didn't move out either. It didn't feel like his house anymore. It felt like something we were both building day by day. Jason texted me once. Just 2 lines. Are you okay? I heard about the company thing. Hope you're alright. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, but because I didn't need to say anything. That chapter was closed. And in a way I was even grateful for it. That heartbreak was what brought me here. Without it, I never would have left. Never would have discovered who I could be on my own. Ryan and I still kept things private. We didn't talk about engagement or weddings. There was no rush. Just dinners that turned into long talks. Walks that didn't feel like therapy. A life quiet and strong. On the first day of fall, we took another trip, just a few hours up the coast. We stayed in a small rental cottage by the sea. No plans, no meetings. Just time. That evening, we walked down the beach together. The sand was cold beneath our feet, but the kind of cold that made you feel awake. The sun was low, casting long shadows behind us. We didn't say much. Just walked side by side, hands brushing now and then, watching the waves come and go. At one point, Ryan stopped walking. He looked out over the water for a long time. You think we ever go back? He asked quietly. To who we were before all this? I thought about it. About who I had been, desperate to be chosen, afraid to speak up, always trying to fit someone else's idea of love. And about who he had been, proud, guarded, running everything by himself, afraid to show weakness. I don't want to, I finally said. He looked at me. Because who we became, I added, is better. He didn't answer. He just smiled, a small, real one, and reached for my hand. This time he didn't let go. And this time I didn't flinch.